Hey guys, basically got the car fully stripped down right now. Now we're going to work on getting out the engine and transmission.
Yep, pretty much. Getting to it.
So jumping right in, we ended up tackling the pulling of the motor and the transmission first. Pulling these motors is actually pretty easy to pull. If you have a lift, they come out the bottom fairly easily. However, we're doing this on the ground, but with a little bit of finesse and some wiggling, they both come right out the top without needing to be separated. The hardest problem that we find with pulling these transmissions is just trying to get the CV axles out. The C clips on the transmission side like to bind up, causing them to be a real pain to pull. What we find works best for us is just getting two pry bars on either side of the axle and prying against the case. Give a little bit of pressure, and if it doesn't move, rotate the axle and pry some more. In my experience, it's mostly just getting the clip in the proper orientation and then they pop right out. We ended up getting those pulled out the day before, along with the front suspension and knuckles, the rear suspension and those knuckles, and then also the rear subframe. The car was missing its rear diff and drive shaft, but thankfully we already have those parts laying around from our other GTX builds. The gentleman that we bought this car off of had this car torn apart slightly. The exhaust manifold was gone, lots of vacuum lines were disconnected, electrical connectors were unplugged, the valve cover didn't have any bolts in it. So it was kind of a rat's nest, but it made it, an easy pull out because we didn't have to disconnect a bunch of random things. The motor that's in this car right now is a 1.6 turbocharged engine, which we will be taking out and not using. We are upgrading to a 1.8 and we are also going NA. In a previous video, we talked about how this will make us more competitive in the NA class. Not as much competition because if we went with the 1.6, we'd have to be in the open class. These transmissions that are in the first generation GTX are kind of made out of glass, so we are planning on upgrading to the GTR transmission, which came in the second generation of the GTX. These transmissions are a bit more beefier and can handle a lot more abuse, so that'll be perfect for us in our rally application. Here Gavin is just taking off the final engine mount, and then we realized that we didn't quite have enough clearance, so we had to take off the hood, which is super easy. Just a couple bolts, pops right out, and bam, we are good to go. Plenty of clearance. Engine is pulled. After getting the motor pulled out, we started tackling everything else that's in the engine bay. Gavin, as you can see, is pulling the windshield wiper bottle while I am starting to pull the headlights. So in this car, we will actually be deleting the power steering pump. We are going to be retrofitting a Prius electronic power steering to the car. We've had a lot of issues with the OEM pumps failing on us, which is not ideal, especially if you have a lot of stage miles ahead of you. So this entails connecting the Prius steering column to the GTX rack. For safety reasons, we have to keep the collapse points on the steering column, so we will be using the Prius safety features. We will be using the Prius turn signals. However, we are just going to be splicing into the GTX light harness, so keeping that harness intact is a necessity. All of your lights have to be operational to pass tech, so breaking any connectors or wires will make our lives much easier. With moving up to the 1.8, we will not be needing the engine harness. We already have a different harness that we will be using with the standalone ECU. So it's not that big of a deal with pulling this engine harness if we break some stuff, but we are trying to keep it intact in case we need it for any of our other builds. Here we are pulling off the bumper. These bumpers are not that hard to pull at all. It's just a couple, about 4 bolts on either side, and the bumper pulls right off. A lot of them were kind of rusty, so a couple of them broke right off. And that'll be just fixed later down once we start putting the car back together. Here I am starting to pull the fenders. These fenders, again, not really that hard to pull. Everything comes off this car quite easily. Just a couple bolts on the top end and then a few on the bottom end, and it pops right out. You end up having to pull out the plastic covering on the inside of the fender and to access a couple of those bolts, and then it pops right out. Gavin's just working on pulling off more random lines, vacuum lines, power steering lines, pulling out the engine mounts where it connects to the to the car. And yeah, everything's just pulling out nice and easy. This car is super, super clean, so nothing is hardly ever rusted on it. Obviously, those 2 bolts that I talked about when pulling the bumper, they snapped right off, but all these other bolts are pulling super, super easily. Gavin's pulling out the power steering rack right now. Again, just a couple bolts, pops right out. Early 80s Mazda, nothing was super complicated. Everything just slides right out, especially once that engine and trans is moved out of the way. As you can see right here, Gavin and I are working on pulling off the doors. These doors are pretty simple to pull off. You just have a wiring harness, a body wiring harness that runs through them. So just making sure that everything gets disconnected before you attempt to pull off the doors. And then it's just 3 or 4 bolts and a couple nuts, and the door just pops right off. Just here we are working on just getting one of those electrical connectors popped out, and then the door will just slide right off nice and easily. So here we move to the rear of the car and we started disassembling everything that's in the back. This includes the rear hatch, the rear quarter windows, the rear bumper and taillights, and then just more odds and ends such as small little trim pieces. Really excited with how easily this car disassembled and that we can now jump right in. We've got a lot of body work to do. We've got to start fitting in our seat brackets, and our seat belts. We've got tons of holes to plug, such as all those holes in the firewall. So we've just got lots and lots of content that we're going to be coming out with here soon. We hope that you're going to follow along with us. We appreciate the likes, the subscriptions, the comments, letting us know what you like and what you want to see done to this car. We've got lots and lots of cool ideas and cool plans for it. So hope you enjoy the journey with us.